Peace. All right, welcome, welcome, welcome. We have a special one. A young man I just met not so long ago, and I just want to bring you on because there's some things that you said, but I'm going to start with the beginning, like who you are, where you're from originally, where you born.
Okay. Who I am Bob Cross, C-R-O-S-S, Cross. I was conceived in the South, on the south side of the Mason-Dixon line, at a time before Black was beautiful. Black wasn't even cute in those days. And so my mother was a teenager, my dad were a teenager. They both were teenagers. They've never married each other. They both married different people. So as a child growing up, I discovered when I got to high school that I had other brothers and sisters that I did not know. I knew the ones that were my dad's wife's children that they had, but I discovered a brother that I didn't know because he was by another lady. So there were 3 different mothers who had children with my dad. So all that did for me, I think, was it just opened me up to be more family oriented. I can be your brother pretty easily, you know. Growing up in the Mid-South, it was referred to, but segregation rules and the written laws and the unwritten laws were the same as they were in Mississippi. I am the same age as Emmett Till. So when Emmett was murdered, I would imagine most other 14-year-old boys, Black boys in the South, had a share in his death and his suffering. And there was a fear that accompanied that, the brutal, cruel destruction of that young man, which I say now that had any of us wanted to die, all we had to do was just say, I'm going to go to the white Baptist church next Sunday morning. You could have gone, but you probably wouldn't, your parents would never seen you again, because they trusted that they laid down a law well enough that by the time you were 14 years old, you had enough sense not to go to the white church. And yet they believed that they're Christian. They were following Christ, but they were carrying on segregation like that. This was 60 miles north of Nashville, Tennessee. This wasn't Mississippi or Alabama or Georgia or someplace. So that's the kind of environment that I was born into and raised with. And surely enough, my grandparents and my parents and the people in the neighborhood had instructed us well enough to know how to navigate and interact with white folk, but it was a special teaching that all Black folk had to get, and then there were signs up at that time. There are places that we could go in and we could get certain services, and there were the places we couldn't. They put the sign up, white only. There was a place that sold hamburgers. I have never been in it because Black people worked in the restaurant, but you could not be served by going in the front door. You had to go around back to get served. I never went to that restaurant. I was moved from a farm, tenant farm, where they did sharecropping. And to me, sharecropping was worse than enslavement. It was just slavery by another name, as one author has written a book by that title. It was cruel and unusual punishment because my grandfather, who was a sharecropper, was imprisoned by the process. At the end of the year, after the crops were gathered up and sold, the big cash crop that they raised in that area was tobacco. But my grandfather never understood the process of settling up. So he just accepted whatever the white man told him he had earned for the year. And he never earned enough to clear a profit in any year that he was sharecropping. And yet he stayed on the farm, continued in the process of sitting down with this man after he took the tobacco to the places in the city to sell it. But then the man had figures on a book that he would show my grandfather. We paid this much for fertilizer, and we paid this much for the plants, and this much for this, and this much for that, and this much for labor, and da-da-da. And my grandfather always ended up in the hole. So then the man said, but he was going to be nice to him and let him stay on in his house. I will provide you with some money and some stuff to get your children stuff for Christmas? And my grandfather would say yes. But I remember I was 4 years old. This happened that my grandfather told my grandmother he was going to move the family off of the farm to town. It was a town that had a high school for black students, but black students from 3 counties went to the school. They had to be bused from outlying farms around. And that school stayed in operation for about 50 years. The last graduating class was 1967. I graduated from Attucks High School in Hopkinsville, Kentucky in 1959. And from there, I earned a place in college as a science major in 1959. So that was beyond my expectations. I think most of my energy was given to just surviving from one day to the next, from 1 week to the next, from one season to the next, like spring, summer, fall, winter. I had a strong survival instinct. I didn't have a well-disciplined plan for my life. Like, I didn't plan to go to college. I remember the talk that my grandmother gave me. She said, "You better not ever think about quitting school, dropping out of high school. You better not ever think about becoming a part of one of these little gangs around here. If you ever go to jail, if you ever get in trouble, it better be for something you did all by yourself." She told me about reform school, that if I didn't complete high school, I would end up in reform school. Now, I don't know if she was telling the truth, but she described reform school in a pretty dismal, dark, scary way that I didn't want to in any part of reform school. I would be beaten, I would be whipped with big straps, and it was just wasn't good. So she did a good enough job to get me graduated out of high school as president of my senior class. That was the upbringing that I had. Mother worked in a laundry, and it was very, very, very difficult work. It was very hard work. And in the summer, her clothes would be so drenched in sweat in the summertime till she looked like she'd been put through the washer and the dryer, the whole process by the time she finished the day. And her pay was very little. I don't think those women made more than $20 a week who worked in the laundry. But that was the best that she was qualified to do. And those women who were qualified for more, they either were school teachers or some of them might have worked in a hospital, but the hospitals were segregated. We were with a tiny little black hospital, one doctor, one registered nurse to take care of all of the citizens of the city. And there were 2 black doctors I know who had doctor's offices in houses, but if you got sick enough you had to go to a hospital, you went to this one black hospital. Couldn't go to the white hospital. I will say at this right here that all of the people, the boards of directors of the Jenner Stewart Memorial Hospital were white Christians. They were all Christian. You could find them at church on Sunday morning, but you could also find members of the Klan in that church on Sunday morning. So I will describe myself in a way that I hope that as I walk through my childhood and my teenage years and my young adult life as a soldier, that the hearers can understand how I became me, how I hold certain attitudes and certain beliefs that I hold today regarding the institutional ideas of life in America under the governance system that we have, that we live under. So I get to college, I drop out of college, and I join the Army because I can't go back home. I'm a man now. I'm expected to be taking care of myself, earning money. Matter of fact, I've been working and going to school through high school, junior high. Always have a job, always hustling and bringing in money, selling papers, shining shoes in the black barbershop. That was a part of my education and my upbringing. So I will always think very highly of and promote my grandmother, who didn't have formal education, but she did have wisdom from God that helped her to help me stay out of trouble and keep me on a straight and narrow path by the discipline of her life to be pretty successful, to be able to sit here today I'm 4 months from 85 years old. I don't have prison as a part of my story. I've never been in prison. I have survived as a black man in America without becoming a felon, something our president cannot say, but I can. The system didn't get me. The system is not going to get me because I belong to God. The God that I belong to is a God that wants to own all of us, is the owner of all of us. I'm here today as a witness, as the scripture says, blessed in the sight of the Lord is the death of one of his saints, and their works do follow them. My grandmother taught me to pray the first prayer that I ever learned in my life, which was a very powerful prayer. Before you go to sleep at night, she had me to get on my knees and repeat after her. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. You teaching that to a 3-year-old, and it worked. I got it. I entrusted my life to the Lord in that kind of way then, and I trust my life to the Lord in that kind of way now. Whether I live or whether I die, I'm going to be in the hands of the Lord. Though I did not live that, teachings of the had not become alive and active in my life as a little boy, but as they lived in my grandmother, they guided me. So it was after serving a 6-year commitment to the military, 3 years of active duty service, 3 years as a reservist, I surrendered my life to Jesus, June 1973. And 1 year later, after surrendering my life to Jesus in 1973, in 1974, the fall of 1974, I had put all my belongings, my earthly belongings, everything I owned, in a station wagon and driven to Columbus, Ohio to enroll in the Eden Bible College. My pastor sent me to Columbus to study the Bible because it had been made clear to me that God wanted me to do this, and that's what all I wanted was what God wanted at that point in my life. And so I came to Columbus as a single young man, and I had some benefits left on my GI Bill that I had to enroll in school and take as many courses as I could, as fast as I could, before the eligibility period ran out on that. And then I enrolled in the Lutheran seminary. When you enroll in the seminary system in Columbus, Ohio, you're enrolled in a consortium of seminaries. There's a Methodist seminary, they have a campus in Delaware, Ohio. The Catholic Josephinum is up at Delaware also. It's kind of like before you get to Delaware at 315 and 270 up there. That's where the Catholic seminary is. And then the Methodist seminary is on Main Street, connected to Capital University. And so I had that experience. I got married during that period of time in the late 70s. We were blessed with 6 sons and no daughters. But, we've grown through a lot of experiences. I worked. I didn't make a lot of money when I was working, but God made up the difference, and somehow we made it. And I became an entrepreneur or self-employed person. I worked 2 places, 7 years, did 7 years at the post office, 7 years at the Home Depot. I'm pretty much think that catches me up to where I am today. Been retired now for over 20 years. Still will take on a job, fixing something at your house if it needs to be fixed. That's kind of my story of, who I am, how I got to be from baby Bob to old Bob.
So you mentioned, I don't know exactly what state you were born in.
Oh, I was born in Kentucky. It's right near Fort Campbell, Kentucky. And the border between Kentucky and Tennessee runs through that military base. And it's called Fort Campbell, Kentucky, because the post office is on the Kentucky side of the border. But a bunch of the land is actually in Tennessee. So I'm right at the Tennessee-Kentucky border was where I was born and raised.
Okay. And then you kind of scared me. I wasn't expecting that you mentioned about Emmett Till.
Yeah.
So explain that you talked about it, but you mentioned he was lynched for whistling.
Okay. Emmett Till was a 14-year-old boy from Chicago who came to Mississippi for the first time alone to visit his grandfather who lived in Money, Mississippi. And there was a little country store there owned by a young white guy and his wife. I think the girl was like 20 or 21 years old. And she said that Emmett Till either whistled at her or said something inappropriate to her. And she told her husband and her brother and some black guys, they got some black guys to go with them. They went out to where Emmett was staying with his grandfather and got him out of bed that night, and his folk never saw him alive again. He was found after they had killed him. They tied a weighted part of a car engine around his neck and threw him in the river, and that's where they found him. The death of Emmett Till happened 1955 at a time when some people believe that it kicked off the civil rights movement because that's what it did for the lady who refused to give up her seat on the bus, Ms. Rosa Parks. She said that that event was what really triggered something in her and a lot of other people who participated in the civil rights marches and parades and different things.
So now you mentioned like that's how you're raised, like as it being a terror barrier. So how did you come out of it? Was it through the theology school? Like what made you the person who you are now, like to speak freely?
How did I navigate? How did I deal with the terror factors of the South? Well, I think it's through the love of a family and being able to go to public school and be touched by teachers who cared about and understood childhood development. I had 12 unbroken years of education, which I credit for a lot of what helped me. But we went to church regularly. We had church family. We just had things to do that kept us intact, that taught us that we weren't who the white folk said we were, taught us who we were. It's active engagement in community with extended family. We had extended family. Everybody knew everybody in the little segregated circles that we had to stay in. And so if I got in trouble, if I did something, that I shouldn't have done, my prayer was that my teacher won't let my mother know that I acted out at school, or Miss So-and-so won't tell, in the neighborhood, that I'm traveling in and that kind of thing. Because everybody, the village really raised the children. That really was a real practice.
So what activities did you do? Like was it soccer, like basketball? Like, was it popular? Like, what was activities that you did to keep you entertained?
Well, I was blessed to be introduced to music at about 6th grade. Had a great industrial arts teacher who taught us drafting. He started, I think, in 6th grade teaching us drafting. And then we moved from there to be able to build small wooden objects by hand with hand tools. And then when you got to high school, you could take on projects that required power tools. And by the time you graduated, you could make fine furniture that could be sold in stores. So those were activities that we had in our educational system. The music thing got me. I got hooked on music and reading. My grandmother got me hooked on phonics. So she taught me to read. And I enjoy reading to this day because I think her introduction of me, to reading.
What is phonics?
Huh?
What is phonics? What is that?
Phonics is a reading method. Reading is fundamental, and you develop a vocabulary through reading. Your vocabulary increases. And the children who have a vocabulary coming into school usually can be counted on to graduate and stay ahead of their peers the rest of their life. That's kind of a rule of thumb. Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to assume, so that's what made you to be a preacher, I'm assuming? So Army, you were airborne. Let's talk about that, and then how did you become?
Well, my grandmother did most of the work for the Army. The Army didn't have to do much work and discipline me. I was ready to be all the soldier that you could be by growing up with that lady. And she believed in corporal punishment, but she didn't whip me a lot. She lived what she taught me. She believed in the Bible. She lived the Bible, and she prayed. She sang hymns. I was awakened not by an alarm clock. I still don't use an alarm clock to wake me up, but it was the smell of the bacon cooking, man. That's what woke me up in the morning. And she cooked food all day long, 3 meals a day. I lived close to the house close enough to the school that I came home to eat lunch at home. And sometime lunch was the same potatoes that I'd had in the morning, just cooked differently. Potatoes 3 times a day, cooked different. And you prayed and you thanked God for what was set before you. And you did. I never learned not to like this. I don't like that. I don't. I like everything. I like food, man. If it's alive and it stays on the plate, I'll eat it.
What's your favorite dish then?
Huh?
What's your favorite dish?
I'd probably have to say chicken in one form or another. That blessed bird, the chicken. you know.
Okay, so you mentioned that you traveled a lot.
Yeah.
Was that during the Army?
Well, in the Army, yeah, I had some exotic trips in the Army. I came home from Southeast Asia in the spring of 1962, and I went to Mississippi as a soldier, as a part of what's called TDY, special duty. It's a temporary duty assignment. But I went to quell disturbances in Southeast Asia and be introduced to the Vietnam era of war that I did not participate in. I'd seen enough when I was in the area that the next year I was being discharged. I was being separated from military duty. So now the talk is reenlistment. You want to reenlist? You want to sign up for another 3 years? No, I don't want to sign up anymore because I don't want to go over there. I have no business over there. I just had enough insight from my training coming up that what was getting ready to happen in Vietnam didn't concern me. I didn't have any business being there. And I thank God that I was old enough to volunteer for the Army in time, for this to be my experience. So I missed that.
Okay. So being a traveling man, where are the places you've been to?
Well, lived on the East Coast. When I got out of the Army, I traveled with a buddy that I met to New Jersey. I wanted to go someplace I didn't know anybody. I didn't have any relatives there. So I didn't have any relatives on the East Coast, and I'm going to be close enough to New York that I'm going to interact in that big melting pot of all people from all over the world, millions of people, and put to the test what I'd learned in the Army. They taught me that I could survive in any environment. I believe that, and I proved it that I could. So far, I've done it. I worked in factories, on the farm. I worked in funeral homes. I worked in hospitals. I've done every kind of job imaginable. And I moved down the coast. Okay, what did I do when I got to New Jersey? There was a big mental hospital, psychiatric hospital. I went to apply for a job really as an orderly at that hospital. I ended up enrolling in training in psychiatric nursing.
Before that, how do you know about job postings back then? Was it word of mouth? How did you know about job postings? Was it word of mouth, the newspaper?
Well, no, it was just at that time, the employment situation in America was so that you could, if you were a young person, healthy person, you could go and get hired to work in this factory or this place in the morning. If by break time, if you don't like it, you could just quit, just leave and go get a job next door at another place. They hired us very prolifically because the thing of war, it benefits people who make stuff. I worked at one place that had a contract for the military and they made metal wall lockers. They had a contract with the military. And so I went in as a shear operator. A shear operator cuts the metal, comes off the truck, big flat pieces. And if you can read and you can measure, you can operate the machine, right? So there were places that one place, it might have been the same factory, this is a part of the factory, but they had lanyards, just a strap around your wrist, and it was connected to the machine so that when the machine come down to cut the metal, they were cutting metal there. The thing automatically jerked your hands back because people had gotten mangled, because it kind of hypnotizes you. You stand there all day sticking it metal, and you don't get your hand out of the way. So yeah, they've devised ways to keep us in low employment, manual jobs that they don't want to do, but yeah, they'll work with you,
Okay.
provide you with a job.
Okay.
But like I said, I was born in that time when that was going on, and just, that's the way it was.
All right. Cool. So you was explaining how you got to New Jersey.
Yeah, I got to New Jersey riding with my buddy who got his separation papers about 2 weeks after mine. I hung around Fort Campbell at my grandmother's house. And when he got ready to leave, I remember my grandmother sitting on the porch. She said, "I'll be praying for you, son." I didn't know how much I would need that prayer. I didn't know what all I was going to get into once I got there. But I came back to visit her 8 years later. It took me 8 years to get enough money to get a car to get back home to visit my grandmother. Yeah. But I was determined to do it, and it happened. It worked out for me. I got discovered by people who had a consulting company, and I was volunteering with women who were on welfare. There's an organization called Welfare Rights, and the demonstrations that we see going on today around immigration, the demonstration was going on then around people on welfare, and their welfare, just because a woman's on welfare didn't mean that she was the parent of prisoners, people who the police should come and take away every time something bad went on. Because these were usually unmarried women, young women with children that were getting assistance from the state. They were getting food from the state. They were getting these governmental programs like SNAP and that kind of thing. So I volunteered to help train some of them in their reading skills and to prepare them to be employed and do that kind of stuff. And it was a lady who came over from New York to Newark, New Jersey, where I lived, and she worked with a consulting company. She volunteered to work with the same women on welfare that I was working with. And in meeting her, she took me and introduced me to people at the consulting company who hired me. I just had some natural skills that worked, and I was teachable, trainable, and they hired me, and I did pretty good with them for several years. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So how long did you stay up there, New Jersey, New York area? 8 years?
Yeah, 8 years. Then I moved down to Philadelphia. I stayed in Philadelphia a couple of years. Then I moved to California. I actually hitchhiked to California. I was probably one of the last hitchhikers that I hitchhiked all the way from Philadelphia to San Francisco.
Okay. Are you a movie star? California, like, how was that life?
I moved to California. I think the weather helped me go to California. I was tired of the cold Northeast winters, and I'd been always brought up in these changing seasons. I went to California, I think, to see what if it was really true, the stories I'd heard about California. And they were pretty true, most of them. And I kind of lost my mind in California also, because the freedom that existed there. On the one hand, the weather was favorable. You didn't have to have a place to live. If, a guy, you could sleep outdoors at night, And there was some good times, good experience. You could travel 500 miles from San Francisco to Los Angeles. And then you go a little bit further, you're in San Diego, and you step out of San Diego, you're in Mexico, So We could travel across the border without being hassled a lot like they're doing now with people with migration and that kind of thing. Drugs were flowing very freely, and I participated in that activity.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what kind of work were you doing out there? Or how long do you stay out there too? Like how
Okay. I really didn't do any work.
Okay.
I didn't work back then. I found out ways to make money for me.
Okay.
But I lost the fear of not having a job. I got to have a job. I didn't have to have a job.
What is that like?
What was that like,
was it, like
living like that?
not the fear, moving the fear of not having a job, like what was that like?
I had enough formal education, and I learned pretty easily from my environment, from what's around me. And I'm in the street. I don't know. I'm sure I was doing some things to make money that were not legal. All of it wasn't legal. But, I figured out a way how to get the connection between delivering something to somebody and getting paid for it, and then paying my bills, paying for rent, that kind of thing. And I was homeless for a period of time. I can look back now and realize I really didn't have a home. I hadn't negotiated a lease or rental agreement with anybody, but nobody knew I wasn't homeless. Because if I came to your house, I asked you to use the bathroom and you hear the shower running, I'm taking a shower, and because I learned to take care of myself and be respectful enough to you that, it was cool with you that I took a shower while I went into the bathroom, right? I'm not going to abuse my visit to your house. And I know it's not going to cost you that much more for the water used for me to take a bath than anything. So I didn't make a big deal about it. So nobody knew I was homeless, right?
All right. So then what was the next place after California?
So after I went through a lot of experiences in California. I lived in San Francisco. I lived on Haight Street, the Haight-Ashbury district. That was the capital of hippiedom, Yeah.
Okay. So after that, you came to Ohio, or did you make a few more stops?
No, I went when I left California. I ended up back in my hometown.
Okay.
I went by way of New York and D.C. and Maryland, the places I'd lived when I was on the East Coast, and I went back that way. I actually went to Indianapolis and Kokomo, Indiana. There was a town called Kokomo. It's a factory town, General Motors, and most of the people in Kokomo worked at the automobile industry. The radios in all of the cars, the GM cars, were made by a particular company. I can't think their name right now, but my aunt worked there, Delco, I think. That might have been whose radios were in the Corvettes and everything. She had started as a cleaning woman in the factory, and she'd moved up to an inspector in the radio division. And her husband worked for Continental Steel, had contracts with Sears, providing them with chain link fence. So I worked with the factory where he worked, running chain link fence through the galvanizing process, rolled it up, and, doing that.
All right. So when's the transition to, I assume, you being a pastor?
So how I got to being a pastor was it was a call of God on my life, and it was gradual. It started in California. It started with me hearing a song sung by Aretha Franklin at a part of the double album that she made in 1972. It was titled Amazing Grace. In that album, there's one song. The song says, "Give yourself to Jesus. You don't have much time. Give yourself to Jesus. He'll make your life sublime." Now, I don't know how many people had this experience, but it seemed like Aretha Franklin was singing just to me, telling me, calling me, give yourself to Jesus. You don't have much time. And I think my interpretation of that was that I really have lived about 2 or 3 different lives in 32 years. I was 32 years old, but I'd done everything. I couldn't think of anything else that I wanted to do that I hadn't done. That left me so frustrated, right? I'd lived like a billionaire, and I hadn't hurt anybody. I hadn't, God had somehow kept me. The prayers of my mother, my grandmother, and people who knew how to pray They prayed for me. I wasn't praying for me, but the prayers of my other folk who knew me and knew God, they prayed for me. And I think that's what kept me, to be able to hear this woman telling me, better give yourself to Jesus, will take care of you, because I know at that time I had accumulated a lot of earthly goods stuff. I started just giving it away. I gave away my money, took diamond rings off and gave it away. Just started giving, so I don't want it. I just gave it away because Jesus didn't need it. Jesus was calling me. But when I took advantage of a VA benefit that I had, because after the psychiatric nursing that I'd gotten into at the state hospital, I left the state hospital and I worked for the VA hospital. And I knew what to say to get admitted as a mental patient. And I went to the hospital and I told the person what I needed to say to get them to lock me up and give me some lithium and come back and talk to me the next day, because I'd gone out and gotten guys out of jails and different places and brought them back to the hospital to admit them. So I told them what I needed to say to get them interested in me, to take me in and lock me up. Now, I had a plan. My plan was I'm going to stay here the rest of my life and just rock in these big rocking chairs that they got up here in the fenced-in areas and just stay here until I die. Because I'm tired of people. I'm sick of people. People is crazy. People they're trying to take advantage of you. They're going to beat you out of what you got. They have to, they know more than they think they know, and they should know, and they don't know what they ought to know. And it was just weird. But I couldn't die. Nobody would kill me. I was miserable. I said that before. I would have said I was miserable. I was like, this is not right. And then God is calling me now on top of everything else. But I surrendered. I did what she told me to do on the song. And then God let me out of the mental hospital. I was in a mental hospital when I got on both of my knees and gave my life to Jesus. So if anybody want to know or want an image of what it's like to, become involved with Christ and Jesus and the Bible from the beginning, from just being all backwards and wrong and by yourself and everything, I'm your guy, Yeah, that's the way I came.
All right. So now let's talk about the reason, probably may take time, but for people to understand what you mean was like, break down the religion and the church aspect. Like, what do you really need to survive in this world?
Okay, so the steps into the church from the beginning?
What you mentioned yesterday, finding Jesus, like you need to find Jesus first. The breakdown of the church and religion, like.
Okay, what I mentioned yesterday, talking about my understanding of current events, what's going on.
Correct.
With the presidency that we have now, the guy who's the president and what he's doing to the Constitution, who he is and where he came from, that whole thing.
Yeah, we could talk about that, but I was mentioning more so like who we are, like how. Yeah, yes, eventually yes, because in that way you mentioned we're greater than, like we're not lesser than anybody. So
right.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So I was raised by teachers who taught me, and back then, most of the teachers that I had probably had a Bible in the classroom on their desk. That was just a part of who we were as the colored children in Christian County, Kentucky's public school system. Very segregated, but they were very free to teach us whatever they wanted to teach us. And they taught us the thing that Jesse Jackson used to say to people. And Jesse Jackson wasn't the originator of this. There was a pastor from the church in Atlanta, Georgia, who wrote it, I think. But the little call and response thing, I am somebody. I am somebody. I may be black, but I am somebody. I may be poor, but I am somebody. I may be uneducated, but I am somebody. And when you get that in you, it's pretty impossible for a nobody to come and move you, get you shook up about you ain't nobody, especially if it happens at the right time during your formative years when you were developing as a child. And so here's a peculiar thing about jumping back to education for just a minute. Money was budgeted through the state treasury for us to be educated, but the money was taken for our education and given to the white people. We got what was left. So by getting us used to accepting leftovers, we got new school books when the white children got new school books. When they got new school books, we got their old school books. And the deal that they put in the paste on the fly leaf of a book and they put names in it, we had to put another label over that and start all over again with it.
Wow.
Because they were keeping us behind them educationally. That's just how they did it. And we still were ahead of them. But anyway, we learned to be white racist out of the same textbooks that the white racists learned to be white racists. So this is why now, as old as I am, I still have to work on getting some of those racist ideas out of my mind. And I got to take all those white folk that I put in the Bible, the white people put in the Bible. I got to get rid of all of them, those white people. God is white, Mary's white, his mother was white, everybody important was white and good and virtuous. And then black, let's look at the synonyms for black in the dictionary. Who want to be black? Everything black is no good. Black and blue, black male, black listed, black. It's on the downside. It's black is down. No, black is wrong. Black is out. So having been born just in time when this is being confronted in the culture in America, I realized that was the best thing could have happened to me. I was born at the right time. Just the right time. Because now I have dismantled the white power structure in my brain where I know the value of black. I know that the Bible teaches us that it begins in darkness. God is not afraid of darkness. God's not afraid of the dark. There wasn't nothing there but blackness. You can't read the Bible and believe the Bible and deny this fact. God had to say, let there be light, not so he could see what was going on, but so we could see what he was doing. Let there be light. And that didn't happen until several days of creation. Let there be light. Turn some light on up in here. But it's fun now, man, because we're out of the woods. If get the Bible. If anybody wanted anything, if I had any amount of money, ask me to buy you a Bible, give you a Bible. That's the most blessed gift that I can give you. And then you got to be willing to be taught from that book, from the Bible, because here's God existing in blackness. You can't see God. You can't see God with light either. You can't. But God gets an idea. I want to create a being like myself. Where does he do that? The rivers are named. It is no mistaken where he chooses to start making human beings. He didn't go to the Netherlands. He didn't go to Eastern Europe, the Caucasus Mountain to make people. No, the first folk he made were black people. So God remembers a time when there were no white people on earth. Where did white people come from? Who are these white people? Right? We don't have to be afraid to say that now. We're speaking scientifically, and we can do it in the classroom. We can do it at the zoo. but we're going to clear up this lie about who was created first and who was cursed and who was. Just read the Bible. They introduced the Bible to us. They forbade us to read it. We couldn't read any book. They could not catch you trying to read it. They made a preacher out of me. They put a Bible under my arm, and they put the white slave owner's clothes on me, and they sent me out as a preacher among my own people. I couldn't read the book. I got to go and tell them this is a good book. I didn't know if it was good or bad. I can't read the thing. I don't know what's in it, but what was in it was a love message from God about me, but they twisted that all up on me. They messed me up with it. But God, by the time I come around, I had a great uncle who was a pastor. He was a great preacher called of God, and he taught me how God used him, how God used other people to develop him, and he was the first person in my family that I know who attended seminary. He attended American Baptist Seminary. in Nashville, Tennessee. But that was long after he started preaching. He started preaching. He said he did not know the plan of salvation, yet he was preaching and people were being saved, people were being baptized, the whole thing. It was happening. So our theology is miraculous, but it's very real. And now, like I said, I can say some things that if they occurred to my great uncle, he wouldn't have said them. He just wouldn't have. He would, but I'm free to say it, and laugh about it. But the white people of this empire, the American empire, they did their job well enough to torture us, to make us miserable, to keep us on our knees, to cause us to believe in God. And somebody said about, I think they were talking about a time in the state of South Carolina, said if you didn't believe in God, you didn't have anything to believe in. You had no hope, and that's very true. So the fact that God is with us and will never leave us or forsake us has been proven just in our American experience. And so we don't have to lie on anybody. We don't have to say anything to try to make people feel bad. We don't have to say things to try to make people feel good who should feel bad. I can tell you what, honey, if telling you the truth about my enslavement and my dehumanization that you have put on me makes you feel bad, I can tell you, take 2 aspirin, go to sleep, come and see me tomorrow. You'll be getting better. You'll get over it, brother. Come on, man. I can't tell the truth because the truth makes you feel bad, Then they stretch it. Now they said, we have to apologize for being white. You don't have to apologize for being white. You have to apologize. You need to apologize for mistreating me because I wasn't white. That's what you need to apologize for. And I'm still waiting for that apology. Yeah.
So this is going to be random off, but so do you believe in reparations?
Do I believe in
reparations?
Yeah, definitely. So legal matter, and it need to be taken up by good lawyers and good economists. I don't want nobody out here that I see around today to asking for my reparation because I think the bill is high enough now that America just need to sign over everything to us, That would be fair, okay? But yeah, I believe in reparation.
So this is an intro for people. So we can always come back. You're welcome to the platform. But I want you to leave out with talking about people that discount God. Like they think they're above God, but they're not.
The people who think they are
above God, yeah.
Above God?
Yeah.
Well, I think that, and I reference this book because it's the best resource that I found dealing with the subject, but Nancy Eisenberg, professor at Louisiana State University. She has written a book published several years ago. The title of the book is White Trash. It's such a refreshing book to read because it tells a truth about white people that we know, and we've known, we've heard about it. We've heard the term white trash. White people, that's what white people call these white people, white trash. They were the lowest class of people. They didn't own anything. They didn't have anything. And I got an idea recently just studying the current president of the United States, Donald Trump, studying where he came from. He's only 3 generations deep in America, and his love for this country is unreal. It's not real. He doesn't love America. He doesn't love any place. He doesn't love any people. He doesn't love anybody. Who this guy is, he's from the white trash group, the group that had nothing, but now has money. He was taught to hustle. So that's what he is. He's a gangster. He has some college degrees, but he has no college education. He's not prepared to lead anybody anywhere. Not prepared to lead himself. So all these felony convictions are real. All of his deviant interest, his lack of respect for women and what he thinks women are good for, all of that fits a certain type of male character, but those males wouldn't even be considered to wash the presidential car or to drive it. A black guy with Donald Trump's resume would not be considered GS3 government job, could not do it. And here he is now, got people afraid to go outside, to go to the store, to go to the hospital, to go to school, to just to live their lives in America. He can be expected to go worse if he's not stopped. And who's to stop him but you and me, us, the regular people? We must tell him stop. We must stop him, and he will have to stop, according to the Constitution of the United States. I've said this before, and I've been interrupted by a black man who tell me the Constitution wasn't written for us. Okay, I have no problem with that. But the Constitution is what we have now until we don't have it, if we keep talking about it's not written for us, because it's being trampled in the ground by this white trash dude with a bunch of money, because he can pay people to engage in all kinds of sinful behavior with him to carry out an idea that he got in his head from somewhere. It didn't come from God. It didn't come from the scriptures. But if everybody keep allowing themselves to be afraid to confront him, afraid to tell him, call him the real names that he really is, he's such a name caller, third grade kind of infantile behavior. But who he is the grandson of a young teenage guy who came to America running from service in the German army way back when the gold rush was on in the Northwest territories. And he went out there, and rather digging in the ground to prospect and get some gold, he went out there with the idea of selling sex to the guys who were prospecting for gold. And he made a bunch of money. That's the beginning of Trump money, pimpings, granddaddy, draft dodger, became a pimp. He went back to Germany, and he got the woman there next door to be his wife, and the German officials caught him on his way out and told him, take this woman, leave, don't come back. He was put out of Germany. So then he met a woman, impregnated her, and his son Fred was born. And Fred met a woman from Scotland who was a babysitter and she was doing domestic work. And he married her, and they made Donald and 4 or 5 other children. Okay, so that's where Donald Trump has come from. So Donald Trump has never had anybody to teach him to be a decent human being. Never. He doesn't come from that deep stock. He doesn't come from that. And he was never trained or disciplined as a child. Nobody ever told him no. He, was riding, chauffeur driven around in a limousine and stuff. But who is this guy? Who is his dad? His dad, Fred, is a member of the Ku Klux Klan. Who's the Ku Klux Klan? Ku Klux Klan is an old version of ICE. They come out festooned in white sheets to scare Negroes at night, to burn your house down. But they call themselves a Christian organization. It gets interesting. It gets deep. It's beautiful. I love to tell the story.
You had a mic.
Yeah. These people really existed. They were former Confederate generals, soldiers in the Confederate Army. They declared war against America. They were genuine, rebels against the Constitution of the United States. And at the end of that war, when Lincoln was president, Lincoln kept the Union Army together, and the Union Army had more generals than the Southerners did. If it had lasted a year longer, they might have lost. But they wore them down. They got them to where they were putting their children in the Army. There's a museum I went into in Mobile, Alabama. I stayed in there all day reading about this period. There was a capture of some Confederate soldiers, and when the word got back to the Union general, that these were children, 13-year-old children, young children, 12, 13, 14-year-old children, he gave an order, get those children back with their parents. And that's what happened. But that's how bad it had gotten. They were putting their children out there to fight. So their farms were gone. Their hope for a future was gone. But they were given a new lease on life. See, that was a mistake. That was a mistake. And I've been anywhere in the Army. If I'd have been riding a horse, if I had any rank at all, I'm going to give an order that all of these surviving Confederates about face, their back is toward the bay. March, forward march. We're going to march every last one of you into that bay until the last head goes underwater for the last time. If we'd done that, we wouldn't be having this problem we have today. That's what real soldiers do in real war. But all of a sudden, the war didn't become real to us because these white men are fighting each other, and they don't know if it's worth to fight like that, to treat the enemy like an enemy, like a real enemy. But that's what you do with a real enemy. And so hopefully next time we will do that. We won't welcome them back in because their heart hasn't changed. And we welcome them back in, and we're into Reconstruction. The Reconstruction period happens, and they make a deal for the presidency with the guy who is running for presidency. We will take away the protection from the Negroes of these soldiers in exchange for letting this guy be president over this guy. Well, you had the vice president, Andrew Johnson, who became the president after they killed Abraham Lincoln, who was on the side of the enslavers. He believed in slavery. He was on the side of the planters. So he did that. Not only did they do that, but they paid reparations to the white landowners and planters for their loss, for what they lost. You lost your slaves, we're going to pay you money for these. The blacks ain't got no reparation. Everybody got reparations about this situation but us to this day. And so we got to educate, we got to talk, forums like this and others, but we got to talk about the real stuff, and we got to work with real laws that we have on real books. We have laws of birthright citizenship in the Constitution, the amended Constitution, not the unamended, the amended Constitution. And if we're not careful, this president, from this white trash president, the white trash guy, here's how you can tell people who've come from the white trash category of life. They're just angry, insanely angry at everybody, and you can never satisfy them. You can't give them enough. More, but never enough. They want to make us be like them. We can't be like them. Somehow God is with us. God has put something in us. We're not going to mistreat you like we've done us. That's what they're afraid of. They know what they would do by now if they could get a hold of us and have what they did, the way they treated us. Nah. Once you've experienced enslavement the way that we did, and God brings you out of it the way that God has brought us out of it, you just want to be done with it, man. I ain't going to be no slave. I'm going to own no slave. Don't want to hear slavery no more. Because God is asking me a question every day. Where is the justice in enslavement? There's no justice in it. That's unjust. It can't ever be ascribed to me that I have had anything to do with this. I'm a just God. Not fair, but I'm just. Let me tell you how you can remember. Remember this. If God was fair, every man would have the boxing abilities of Muhammad Ali. That would be fair. God's not fair. God makes something different. Go ahead.
All right. No, that's it. Just hopefully people could digest that, and we just come back for a second round. But for right now, just give a quote for the people, encouragement, your quote or a quote that help people move forward.
Yeah, well, I hope I presented what I presented well enough that everybody's not in tears, because, it's not only what you tell, it's how you tell it sometimes that affects people different ways. I mean, I have no need to talk about what it's like to be, born to unwed parents and, when God has blessed me as much as God has blessed me, so what? Nobody know how you got here, right? You're here, so celebrate and be glad. So that's why I don't lean toward the tear-jerking kind of telling of the story. And white folk, as mean and as bad and as unjust as they've been, They couldn't stop me, so I made it. I'm here. I'm good, you know. And, like I said, it's just God's, just let's go with God, man. And God will go with us. And if you got God, you ride with God, brother. What you worried about? You got everything. If we need something, God said, God never say, oh my goodness, what we gonna do? No, God is just speaking into existence. Like he did the food that they had. They had a little boy's lunch. They fed 5,000 men, not counting the women and the children, with one little boy's lunch. Because God took it, blessed it, broke it, and started handing it out and handing it out and handing it out. That God is real. That God is real.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So how can people reach out to you? Thank you for coming on, but how do people reach out to you? Or do you want to be reachable?
I've got an email now, a Gmail email that I don't have a password to it. My email got jacked up.
Okay.
Any question you have, I know something about it. I'm not going to say I got an answer, but I know something about it. So sometimes it's good to get another head involved in your question. Then we move toward an answer. But let's talk, man. Let's talk. I don't know it all. You guys, if you want to challenge some of the things I've said, I'm open to that. Let's prove it. Yeah.
All right. Cool. Appreciate your time. And thank you. Thank you very much.
Well,